The rain hammered against the pavement as Sandra locked her office door at midnight. She was exhausted, drained from another 16-hour workday. But as she turned toward the parking lot, she heard it, a small, muffled sob coming from behind the dumpster. Sandra froze. Every instinct told her to keep walking. Instead, she found herself moving toward the sound. What she discovered would shatter everything she thought she knew about herself. Crouched in a puddle of dirty water was a small boy, no older than 7, clutching a torn teddy bear. His lips were blue from the cold, and his eyes held an emptiness that no child should ever know. Sandra made a decision that would change 2 lives forever. She reached out her hand and whispered, "Come with me." If you love heartwarming stories that restore your faith in humanity, hit that subscribe button right now. You won't want to miss what happens next. Sandra had built her entire life around control. As a corporate lawyer in downtown Seattle, she controlled everything. Everything except her own heart. Because as she looked at this trembling child, something inside her cracked open. The boy wouldn't speak. He just stared at her with haunted eyes, and Sandra noticed the bruises, dark purple marks on his thin arms. She couldn't leave him there. The drive to her apartment was silent except for the windshield wipers. Sandra kept glancing at the small figure in her back seat, wondering what she was doing. When they pulled into her building's parking garage, she heard his voice for the first time, small and broken. "Are you going to hurt me?" Those 5 words nearly destroyed her. Sandra turned around and said with more certainty than she'd felt about anything in years, "Never. I promise you, never." His name was Jackson. She learned this after the hot shower, after she'd wrapped him in her oversized bathrobe, after she'd made him 3 grilled cheese sandwiches that he devoured like he hadn't eaten in days. Because he hadn't. Jackson sat at her kitchen island, and slowly the story emerged. His mother had died 6 months ago, cancer. His father had never been in the picture. The foster system took him in, but his last placement was bad. Really bad. So 3 weeks ago, he'd run. A 7-year-old living on the streets because anything was better than where he'd been. Sandra called child services. The automated message said they were closed until morning. She looked at Jackson, who was clearly expecting to be sent back into the rain. "You'll stay here tonight," she said. "The guest room is yours." His entire face transformed. Sandra felt something shift inside her chest, something terrifying and wonderful. That night, she brought him warm milk and cookies. "Just for tonight?" he asked quietly. Sandra nodded, not trusting her voice. But she'd already been researching emergency foster care and temporary guardianship for hours. These real-life stories never happened to people like her. Except now they did. Sandra woke at 6 a.m. to find Jackson in her doorway, rigid with fear. "You're still here," he breathed. "I thought you left." The pain in those words gutted her. She patted the bed beside her. "I'm not going anywhere." Then she did something she hadn't done in 5 years. She called her office and took a personal day. Then another. And another. Because Jackson needed her, and suddenly that mattered more than any case. The first days were a revelation. Jackson had never had pancakes, never owned a new toy, never been to a real playground. They went shopping, and in the toy aisle he surprised her. He didn't choose action figures. He chose a puzzle. "I like how all the pieces fit together," he explained. "To make something whole." Sandra turned away to hide her tears. The moments accumulated, reading together. Jackson teaching her games from his imagination. Him drawing at her kitchen table. One afternoon he presented her with a drawing. 2 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. In careful letters, "My family." Sandra pressed that drawing to her chest and wept. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to be temporary. But Jackson had slipped past every defense, and she didn't want him to leave. Reality came knocking. Child Services scheduled a visit. The caseworker, Ms. Rodriguez, arrived with a clipboard and skeptical expression. She interviewed them both, inspected everything. "I appreciate what you've done," Ms. Rodriguez said carefully. "But temporary guardianship isn't simple, especially for a single woman with a demanding career and no parenting experience. We need to find Jackson a proper placement." Jackson had been listening. Sandra found him hiding in her closet, crying silently. "Everyone always sends me away," he choked out. "I thought you were different." Sandra climbed into that closet and pulled him into her lap. "I am different, and I'm going to fight for you harder than I've ever fought for anything. You're not going anywhere." These hopeful journeys never came easy, but she meant every word. The next 3 months were chaos. Sandra restructured her work schedule, converted her home office into Jackson's bedroom, enrolled in foster care training, even called her estranged sister for help, and Jackson transformed. The hollow-eyed child was being replaced by a boy who laughed, who played, who started to believe he could stay. Then Jackson's biological aunt surfaced, claiming she wanted custody. Sandra's lawyer was blunt. She wants the welfare benefits, but blood relation gives her legal standing. A court date was scheduled. The night before the hearing, Jackson came into Sandra's room at 2 a.m. "What if the judge sends me with her?" Sandra pulled him close. "Then I'll keep fighting." "Why?" he whispered. "Why do you want me so much?" Sandra's answer came from somewhere deep and true. "Because you're mine, Jackson. By choice. And that's stronger than anything." The courtroom was cold and intimidating. The aunt's lawyer painted Sandra as inexperienced and career-obsessed. Then Sandra's lawyer presented their case. Letters from neighbors, Jackson's improved schoolwork, his therapist's testimony about his remarkable progress. The judge spoke. "I'd like to speak with Jackson, alone." The waiting felt like hours. When Jackson emerged, his eyes were red but determined. "I told him the truth," he said. Sandra knelt down. "What truth?" "That you're my mom, the only one who counts." The judge's voice cut through the tension. He was granting temporary custody to Sandra Knight, with a clear path to adoption. The aunt's rights were terminated. The gavel came down. Jackson ran to her and she caught him. "We did it," she whispered. "We're a family." "I know, Mommy," he whispered back. 6 months later, Sandra's apartment looked nothing like the sterile showpiece it had been. Jackson's drawings covered the refrigerator. Photos lined the hallway. She'd learned to braid hair and knew cartoon theme songs. One morning, as she packed Jackson's lunch, she paused to look around. This messy, unpredictable life was everything she'd never known she wanted. Jackson appeared, backpack on. "Bye, Mommy. Love you. Love you too, buddy." As the door closed, Sandra looked at the framed drawing on the wall. My family. Sandra used to think that Rainy Night was about her saving Jackson, but she understood the truth now. Jackson had saved her. He'd cracked open her carefully controlled life and taught her that love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, even when terrified. The corporate lawyer who once defined herself by billable hours now measured success differently. In bedtime stories read, in scraped knees kissed, in a small hand reaching for hers, in a voice calling her Mommy, like it had always been her name. Some people plan their families carefully. Sandra's family found her behind a dumpster on the worst night of both their lives, and it turned out to be the most beautiful accident, because sometimes the family you choose is the family you were always meant to have. Sometimes love doesn't wait for permission. Sometimes it just shows up in the rain and asks you to be brave enough to say yes. This is one of those heartwarming stories that reminds us family isn't about blood. It's about choosing each other every day. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories that prove love happens in unexpected ways. Share this with someone who needs hope. And leave a comment about a time someone showed up for you. Because we all have a story. And every single one matters.